You're the host, so. All right. Well, welcome everybody out to our session with Garen Hess. So we're talking about 8 strategies for scaling pre-sales. DEMOFEST is going fantastically so far. We really appreciate everybody joining in to some pardon me, some amazing sessions so far. Again, DEMOFEST is hosted by Consensus. We help pre-sales teams to scale by use of intelligent demo automation. And Garen Hess, the CEO of Consensus, is our presenter today. Now, Garen is a serial entrepreneur, and he has whoops, sorry, I'm all over the place here. He's a serial entrepreneur, and he has a background that includes quite a lot of pre-sales work in the various companies that he's worked for. As a matter of fact, one of the driving forces for the starting of Consensus actually came from some pre-sales interactions he was having, where he'd done, was it 6 or 7 demos in the same day. Felt like just kind of being on repeat a lot of times, because people had the exact same questions, had the exact same concerns, and so here we are. Where demo automation is now a thing. So Garen's going to talk about 8 strategies for scaling pre-sales. We're recording this session, and we will put the recording in. We will post a link to the recording. Sorry, I'm popping. We're going to post a link to the recording in our LinkedIn group, and I will put a link to the LinkedIn group in our chat in just a moment. But without further ado, to cover just a little bit about Garen and some of the clients of Consensus and so on. You can see, we focus mainly on large enterprise pre-sales teams. And I wanted to give a shout out to the book really quick, because Garen's just publishing his new book called Selling is Hard and Buying is Harder. And don't get me started on this, because here we're getting into buyer enablement, and this is one of our primary thought leadership areas at Consensus. I say ours, it's Garen's. But buyer enablement is essentially the essential flipping of the script of B2B sales, founded on the basic observation that your seller is in charge of enabling the buying, and your buyer does the most important selling in the interaction. They do it within behind closed doors and within the organization itself, and how to leverage that and empower that. So check that out. And release date June 16th on that. All right, without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to you, Garen.
Great, thank you, John, and welcome everybody. I'm really excited to be with you today. And just a note on that book, I'm really excited about it. It's been a 3-year project with a lot of research, pulling research. I found a lot of great principles on buyer enablement kind of scattered throughout different analyst firms and blog articles and things, as well as our own research and experience. And pulling it all together has been really interesting. I've just seen over the years that a focus on the buyer and the buying group and the different stakeholders in the buying group and facilitating them really is all there is to B2B sales. It has very little to do with what we do as sellers, and has everything to do with how we facilitate and help the buyers. So anyway, I'll leave that at that, but I think how it relates to scaling pre-sales is that sales engineers are key to facilitating the buyers. What we're going to focus on today is strategies to scale or boost SE coverage and increase customer experience, improve customer experience with existing headcount. So I know you wouldn't be here if you didn't want to get more out of the existing headcount that you have or understand these ideas. There are a lot of companies under fire right now because of COVID, losing staff, whether it's in sales or in pre-sales or in different parts of the organization. And it's a challenging time, and this topic is more and more relevant as we go along, whether you're in a growth phase where you're hiring and you're having increasing demand, or whether you're losing staff and you've got to do more with less. You're really trying to get more out of the existing team. Now, if you're practitioners, the question is, how can you get more out of your own self? How can you improve and scale your own abilities, or maybe help those around you as well? So let's talk about our goals here at Consensus with the content leadership that we're doing, or thought leadership with DEMOFEST. This really grew out of a scaling pre-sales webinar series that we're doing. So I just want to kind of give a shout out to John, who heads up the scaling pre-sales webinar series. And if you go out to our website, you can see some of the ones that we've done in the past. We're going to continue to do these roughly once a month, just ongoing. So feel free to join those as they seem applicable to you. So you can go get these recordings on previous webinars and virtual panels and things like that on our website in the resources area. So our objective today is really to give you a model to define your own strategy for scaling pre-sales at your organization. The ideas that I'm going to share may or may not be directly applicable. You'll have to decide, but the way I think of them as interchangeable objects that you can choose to implement and leverage in more or less, with more or less emphasis. And as you pull these together in different building blocks, then you'll have your own strategy for scaling pre-sales at your organization. This by no means includes all possible ways to scale pre-sales. In fact, it's very hard to fit even these 8 into this short session, but we're going to do our best. So first of all, we're going to learn about defining the gap, meaning between what we're able to do and what we need to be able to do, whether that's because we've increased in sales and don't have increased capacity, whether there's just increased marketing spend and we're getting flooded with demo requests, whether we are going down market and there's a higher volume and a lower deal size, whether we've got staff that's been cut, right? You've got to define the gap. Otherwise, you're just going to hope that you have a strategy that will fill the gap. And as a friend of mine once said, he calls that smoking hopium. And it doesn't really work. You've got to really figure out exactly what the gap is and have a strategy and specific tactics for trying to fill that gap. We'll talk about better qualification as part of the strategy, categorizing demos to align with the buying process so you can better understand how to leverage your resources in the most important areas in the buying process and when maybe to do some other things. How to equip sales to do some of the demos. I know this is really against most pre-sales personal religion to even think about sales doing any demos, but I think there is a case for it in some cases, in certain situations, very early in the sales process. So I'm going to make that case, and you can decide whether it's worthwhile. Leveraging interactive demo automation, obviously that's what we've built consensus around, and so it's a topic, as John mentioned, in one of my previous startups, I literally did 6 demos back to back, and I thought I just did the same thing over and over. I changed it up based on discovery and kind of personalized it, but I thought some of this could be automated. And that led, after that journey finished, that led to the founding of Consensus, and working with some of the greatest companies in the world, and trying to help improve and lead in whatever way that we can this industry forward. So using video for multilingual market coverage, and then conducting webinars for mass live demos. These are the different areas we're going to cover today. And then finally, what KPIs should you be looking at to see if you're making the scaling progress that you want? So let's talk about some of the obstacles to scale. You can get overloaded with demo demand, and sometimes there's a sales and marketing mismatch where there's just a lot of money being poured into marketing and not enough salespeople or pre-sales people to go along with the lead generation, and training lags between new AEs and SEs. So in some of the research we've done, we've heard many pre-sales leaders say that it'll take 2 to 3 years to mint a fluent pre-sales or sales engineer, but it only takes 4 to 6 months to really get and stand up a strong account executive. So there's just a big mismatch there. Multilingual market coverage is especially difficult in Asia Pac or EMEA. And so how do you do this effectively with your existing resources? Going down market, high volume, we talked a little bit about that most large companies that sell effectively into the enterprise are trying to prevent disruption from the lower end of the market, or trying to create a new revenue stream. And by going down market, you cannot apply the same sales strategy that you have at high deal size, low volume, high touch in the upper market. You've got to move to a somewhat bifurcated strategy where you're automating, delegating, some of those kinds of things. Another challenge is qualification of leads to, or underqualification of leads to wasted demos. So we'll get into how we can better qualify. So the problems that all this causes is, first of all, the clients have to wait. That's never really good. I think it's become the status quo that in pre-sales, we just assume the clients are gonna have to wait for their demo. And personally, I think that's unacceptable. If you had to wait 2 weeks at the doctor's office, you just wouldn't like that. And really, these people have problems that to them are horribly painful, and they want your solution. So why make them wait? Well, usually we make them wait because we don't really have another option. There's nobody in the pool that we can pull from, or the key SE that we need is tied up, so they just have to wait. So that's one of the big problems. You're going to get a bad reputation if you let that stay with your clients, and they'll often, if another competitor can help service them better, they'll go with them. Many clients purchase just based on the sales experience as much as the actual product and solution. So sales waits as well. Most pre-sales teams think of their direct customers as the sales team, and then of course the customers of the company as well. And you want to make sure you have a great customer experience for the sales reps that you service, obviously. The wasted resources, overworked SEs, I'm going to zip through some of these in the interest of time. Robotic repetition versus strategic consulting. And so those are some of the challenges that result, or the problems that result from the challenges. Benefits of scaling: a better client experience. Sales teams get what they need quickly, and they get a better perception of your pre-sales team. Efficient use of resources and better margins, and better alignment of resources with demand. So you don't have as many SEs getting burnt out or overworked and so on. There's a lot of dissatisfaction inside a lot of the companies that we work with initially, because sales engineers who are highly skilled highly technical, effective consultants are stuck doing sometimes as much as 60 to 70% of their time during repetitive demos. And then related to that, just more strategic consulting and less robotic repetition. So you're really helping the sales engineers do what they do best. So just to help you understand the impact that these kinds of strategies can have, Oracle implemented just the demo automation portion of this strategy, and they scaled their pre-sales by over 30% with existing headcount in the first 6 months. So I want to bring up this quote from Bob Dylan, and I got turned on to Bob Dylan a little bit by reading Steve Jobs' biography, and he was a big Dylan fan. I hadn't really looked at him, but I've been quite interested in Dylan's lyrics. And Kevin O'Brien in the keynote said, "The world's going to move on without you, whether you like it or not." And I would say that it kind of goes along with this quote. He not busy being born is busy dying. I wouldn't even try to imitate Dylan because I'm just not, John could actually do it. But I'm not going to try. But my point is,
pleasing to the ear.
But my point is that the world is changing. And if you're not reinventing yourself as a sales engineer, or reinventing your team as a sales engineering team, and moving into digital pre-sales, which, as Kevin O'Brien pointed out, we're all forced to do through the pandemic, but then we're really dying. And so Dylan's main point here is, if we're not reinventing ourselves, if we're not stretching ourselves, if we're not conquering the next horizon, the next mountain that is in the horizon, then we're really withering. We can't really stand still. And so if you have a bent, which we all do in certain situations, to want to just keep the status quo, I would just urge you to ponder that concept that even though everything may seem fine, it's not going to be fine in the future if you don't learn to adapt and work in some of these kinds of ways or other innovative ways that you come up with. So even if things are fine now, you want to prepare for the future. So one concept I want to really emphasize before we get into the details is strategy. And the way that I think of strategy is trade-offs. If you try to do everything for everybody, you don't have a strategy. Trade-offs, a strategy is when you decide what you're going to say no to. And that's more important than what you decide you're going to say yes to. So one of the questions that I'm going to repeat frequently in this session is, what are you willing to say no to in order to get the benefits from scaling pre-sales? And that's a difficult question. None of us like to say no, especially in pre-sales. We're so used to, for better or worse, just jumping on any call that we're asked to do. I would invite you to reconsider that after we go through this discussion, and think and make plans about how to more effectively decide what you will do and what you won't do, either yourself or as a team. And so my main point here is, if you don't know what you're saying no to, then you really don't have a strategy. And on the flip side, saying no means saying yes to more of what you want, what you really need to be effective. So it's not just about saying no, it's about the opportunity cost. When you say yes to everything, you're saying no to so many things you should be saying yes to. So first of all, let's talk about defining the gap. There are really two types of gaps that we're going to address here, and only lightly touch on both. But the first is the increasing demand gap. Now, this demand for pre-sales resources may be, again, happening because you're hiring, or because of the pandemic recently. Maybe it's because you're going through cuts. Maybe it's because you're going down market, right? It doesn't really matter what's causing the increase in demand. It's just there's an increase in the demand. And so we need to define the number of hours that are going to be required in the future, or maybe are required right now. We just can't keep up because of the increasing demand without linear increases in budget, let's say. So the second type of gap is what I would call the key activity gap, meaning the percentage of time SEs are spending on key activities today compared to what is needed to meet the demand gap. So we'll get into that more, but you're going to look at all the activities that your SEs are doing. And Peter Cohen in one of his sessions talked about some tools like Vivin and some others. And I'll give a shout out to Mighty SE as another one that I know of that are trying to track sales engineering activities. So once you understand what their activities are, you need to decide what are the key activities that they should be spending more of their time on, and how can we get them to spend more of their time on that and less of their time on things that are not key. So again, what are we going to say no to so we can say yes to more of that? So to start off on the gap analysis, I just want to point to one piece of data from our sales engineering compensation and workload survey report that we just published a few weeks ago. And this is just one slide out of all the slides you can see over here on the right. But this, and you can download this from our website if you're interested, just down in the resources area. But this was the AE to SE ratio, and the median was 4. So more than half reported that each SE services 4 or more, basically, SE or AEs. So that's the basis of my little analysis, just sort of sample analysis here. So we're going to do what I call a simple demand gap analysis, and it's effectively just the number of future sales. In this scenario, your sales team's hiring. So you'd sort of have to reverse it a little bit, but the same kind of equations if your sales team's getting cut right now, or you're experiencing staff reductions because of the pandemic, for example, which hopefully will only be temporary, but nobody knows how long this will last. In any case, in this scenario, we're talking about if the sales team is hiring, but you're not getting the same kind of budget increase in sales engineering to support that. So let's say the AE ratio is 4 to 1, and you know that your future sales team is going to be 230 reps. So you currently have 40 reps to service those 230, but what we really need is 57.5 or 58 SEs at the current ratio to service those 230, but we're not getting that budget. So what we really need is 17.5 or 18 additional reps, sales engineers to service that increase in demand if we don't make any changes to how we're doing things. And this is how a lot of things go. Hey, the sales team's hiring, we're gonna ask for more budget. Well, lo and behold, right now, budgets are really slammed in all directions. So we've got to think differently about this. But ultimately, this isn't scaling anyway, it's just linear hiring. And a lot of people use the word scale. Oh, we're scaling our organization. We just hired 1,000 people. That's not scaling, that's just hiring people. Scaling is when you get exponential resources or results out of existing resources. So if we look at the same analysis and say, okay, if we can't hire, the ratio becomes 5.75, almost 6 to 1. This is a 45% increase in demand that's going to come from this. And again, if you're losing sales reps or losing pre-sales reps, rather if you're losing pre-sales reps and your sales reps are staying, if the ratio is changing, you're just going to have to do this calculation in a different way. But it's the same effective question. How many hours do I need to keep up with that? What does that look like? In this case, it's 45% increase. So I've got to free up 22 hours per week per SE if I don't get a corresponding budget. So if we could hire, let's just say that we get some budget, and we say we can hire 6 new SEs, not the 17 or 18 that we want. So that makes the ratio 5 to 1. That's a 25% increase. I still have to free up somehow 12.5 hours a week. So what I want to jump out to now is just show you a little sample of, one second to pull up a spreadsheet here. So, and there's a link will be provided to you to this spreadsheet as well. And incidentally, there's a printed guide on our website, or not printed, but a PDF document called Scaling Pre-Sales that you can download that has links to these as well. But what this is just a way of trying to analyze key activities. And I'm going to come back to this because in order to fill the gap that we have, right? So in order to fill this demand gap, we have to understand what kinds of activities we need to increase and what kind of activities we need to decrease, and then evaluate different ways of doing that. So the first question is, do you understand what activities your sales engineers are spending your time on? There are a lot of different things that sales engineers have to do, and there are probably even more than these items here. The question is, what's the best use of the SE's time? And so let's just say, for the purpose of this scenario, that you decide that these blue items are the best use of the time and resources and expertise of your sales engineers. And these others, while important, are less important. So again, we're going to have to try to figure out how to increase the key activities. So back to the question, what would you say no to so that you can increase the time your SEs spend on the best activities? And related to that, instead of really saying no, what I'm really asking you to say is and ask yourself is, what other way can this be handled? So probably have all heard of the theory of constraints. It's basically a bottleneck theory. It's effectively that if you find the most important limiting factor and focus on that, then you can remove that and everything will go a lot better. So the most important limiting factor we're going to argue in this scenario are these repetitive demos. Okay, so let's just jump out to our spreadsheet again. Give me a second to jump there. And what we have over here on the left are all of the activities, and the highlighted ones with the asterisks are what we consider the key activities in this scenario. And we've figured out more or less how much time they're spending. Now, how are you going to measure time? If you don't have a tracking system already of measuring time, I would just recommend maybe once a quarter doing a survey, asking your team members to do a detailed survey response, and you'll get some information there. It may not be as accurate as if you're actually tracking their time, which I'm not sure you want to go to that length, but I would definitely survey your team and see if you can get some baseline of this information, what the current state is. Now, you can see here that we have a gap of 11.5 hours that we need to fill in the future state. And so we want to get that to 0. So we might say, oh, in discovery, let's say I want to have them spend 10% of their time in discovery, maybe 15% of their time on, up from 12% on planning and architecting. POCs, maybe that's another 15%. Strategic consulting calls, maybe that's another 10%. And technical demos, let's say we want that to go up to 20%. Okay, and boom, we're now at 0. We've just saved 11.5 hours per week. Well, we haven't saved it yet, but we know that by increasing their time here and decreasing their time in some of the other areas, we can resolve this difference. So you can see, for example, repetitive demos, spending 8%, I want them to spend 2%. If they're spending 10% on repetitive standard demos, I want them to spend 2%, for example. So you can plug these in, it shows the gap, and then you can try to decide how much you need to increase to get that resolved. So that's unfortunately all I can do to spend, or time I have to spend on this, but you're welcome to come out and just look at this. One of the things that I've done out here is just put an annual team analysis. If you save 11.5 hours a week per sales engineer, you're saving about, on a team of 40 sales engineers, you're saving almost 24,000 hours. So these graphs or images here, charts, just show here's the key activity, 58% of key activities or of a sales engineer's time is being spent on key activities. And what we want to try to get to is get them up around 80% in this case. So then the question remains, how do we do that? How do we save this amount of time? So this goes back to our different strategies, micro strategies we might call them. So let's dive into that. So we want to look at the scaling analysis, which involves answering some key questions. On the assumption that repetitive demos are one of the biggest limiting factors, if not the biggest. There could be many other things that you really want to focus on. Maybe it's POCs that are the big headache causing all the problems. Maybe it's discovery and we're spending way too long or too many discovery calls or who knows what, but we're going to focus on demos here. I really do believe that demos can be one of the biggest limiting factors in many organizations. So the question is, are there demos we can eliminate? Are there demos we can automate? And are there demos that we can delegate? This concept comes from a productivity book by a guy named Roy Vaden, just general business productivity, called Procrastinate on Purpose. I really like it. I think it's a great model for trying to become more productive. Now, if you ask yourself, are there demos we can eliminate? That's a tough one because you're thinking every engagement with a customer is really important. Well, to understand which demos we can eliminate or automate or delegate, we need to understand the 6 demo types. And we have an entirely separate webinar just on this topic, so we're going to blitz through this in 2 or 3 minutes just to try to keep us on schedule. But basically, we've got the buying process over here and different types of demos that your sales engineers are conducting. Whether you think of them this way or not, I guarantee you, they are involved in doing all of these types of demos. A lot of sales engineers just think of the demo as the demo, the technical deep dive demo, when in reality, I believe there are many different types of demos and they get pulled into these conversations and doing demos throughout the buying process. And they're often not even tracking how much time and energy it's taking to do those. So briefly, the vision demo is very at the top of the funnel, where you're just focusing on product solution benefit, very little on product, might be a couple screenshots. The micro demo is still at the very top of the funnel, but once the buyer catches the vision of how you can solve their problems or help them, they want a real demo, but they still don't really want a deeper demo. They just want to see the product, see how it works. By the way, these time estimates are really for automation, which I'll talk about in a minute. So when you're doing them live, they're much longer than this. You know, vision demo might be 20 or 30 minutes, micro demo, again, 20, 30 minutes. You get salespeople that quite often say, hey, I've got a prospect, they want to see a demo for 15 minutes, and the sales engineer, they just want to pull their hair. It's like, how can I demo this complex software in 15 minutes? But they always do something. And that's often the micro demo. And I would say it's not a great use of a sales engineer's time, and there are ways that we can work these early stage demos in other ways. The qualifying, or what we call a standard demo, is what Peter Cohen likes to say, the dreaded standard demo, is this third one, which is usually 45 minutes to an hour, and it's just also very repetitive. So all 3 of these are usually quite repetitive. The technical demo is the one that sales engineers are uniquely qualified to do, and almost never repetitive, highly customized. And this is one of the key areas we want to emphasize, one of the key activities. How can we get them doing more of these or being better prepared for these, as well as the consulting that goes alongside those. And closing demos are also quite custom quite often, but in a lot of ways they don't have to be. Closing demos are those demos that often come up after the customer has decided they want to purchase, but they have a lot of questions about implementation. How does this integrate? How does training work? How does support work? How does GDPR work? Whatever it might be. And quite often, sales engineers are pulled into additional calls, additional demos. They're demoing different little different pieces. It could be add-ons that they're trying to decide whether they want to purchase in addition to the core platform or something like that. Then of course we have FAQ demos, which are kind of like closing demos, but they run throughout, just common questions that come up. So when we're talking about eliminating, automating, and delegating, we want to keep those different types of demos in mind. So that was, again, a very quick run through the way we think about different types of demos. You can find a more in-depth webinar on our website about that. So eliminating demos seems impossible sometimes. We can't just say no. sorry, sales team, we're not going to demo for you today. That just wouldn't go over very well. So what are we saying here? What we're really saying is we want to find a different way to handle some of these demos. Well, which ones are the ones that we really want to find a different way to handle? In this research report on the workload, we asked this question: what percentage of your product demonstrations would you classify as underqualified or unqualified or underqualified? So more than half of the industry said that 30% of their demos are under or unqualified. I mean, it's a staggering productivity drain. And 1 in 5 actually said that half, so 1 in 5 teams said that half of their demos are unqualified. So this is a big opportunity. So which demos do we want to eliminate? It's the unqualified demos. If we can eliminate those somehow from the workload of sales engineers, you instantly, just with this one effort, you'd have an instant 30% bump in your team's productivity if you could eliminate all of them, which is a challenge. But again, just thinking strategically here. So how is it that we can eliminate underqualified demos? So John brought this up in his session on the workload report and survey, compensation and workload survey. But we are advocating that there should be a new lead stage called the DQL, the Demo Qualified Lead. So the industry, the go-to-market industry, which is basically the whole process and technology and best practices and everything, the go-to-market industry really emphasizes this idea of qualifying the lead. You've got your marketing qualified lead, your sales accepted lead, your sales qualified lead, sales qualified opportunity. Well, why isn't there a qualification gate before they engage sales engineers? When arguably the sales engineer is a much more valuable resource than the salespeople themselves, because every sales engineer serves at least 4 additional people in most organizations. So there really should be a lead gate that they have to go through, a qualification gate before we engage the sales engineers. So this brings up automation, because we believe that as we see some of our customers doing, that automation can really help in this area. So by using an automated demo as part of the lead gate, the demo qualified lead qualification, then and what that means is if the prospect will engage with a interactive video demo and share it with somebody else, then they're qualified and ready to talk to pre-sales. And then you bring them educated and ready to talk specifics to pre-sales, rather than having to do 3 different types of repetitive demos potentially, and maybe multiple times because of multiple stakeholders. So what is intelligent demo automation? We don't have time to really go into this in a lot of detail here. There's a separate session on this tomorrow. You can look on the agenda. Demo automation strategies, I think is what it's called, and I'm doing that one as well. And we're going to dive into all the details here. But let me just briefly zip through what this looks like. A sales engineer records pieces of the demo and plugs them into the system using a screen recorder of some kind. And they build out the demo using a wizard-like format. Then the salesperson creates a special link that we call a demo board to send to a specific prospect or a group of prospects in an opportunity. Then they grab that link and put it in the email. And as the prospect receives that email, they click on their name to enter the demo. And then they're going to indicate what's very, somewhat, or not important to them. And based on that, Consensus pulls together different video clips and documents that are unique to their interests. And in an environment that looks something like this. Then the salesperson gets notified that the prospect watched their demo. They can go in and look at how different prospects that are engaging in that opportunity that the demo's been shared with are rating things, whether they're very, somewhat, or not important. So again, this is best used in these early stage demos. And then you get these aggregate analytics as well. So unfortunately, that's all I have time to really say about demo automation, but it gives you a little taste for what is that all about. We call it intelligent demo automation because it's not just sending them to a YouTube. It's actually asking them questions, doing some light discovery automatically, and feeding them some content. And hopefully, depending on the stage of the buying process, they're getting the right kind of demo for their stage. And that leads them to come to that sales engineering focus stage of the technical demo, more educated and ready to talk specifics. So what demos can we automate? We'd argue that you can automate almost all of them, all these types of demos, a lot of them anyway. And the technical one is the one that you probably don't want to try to automate because that's so unique, and the sales engineers are uniquely qualified to do that. Given the time, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is an example of where the types of demos might fit in a sort of simplified view of the buying process. So we call this selling in the gaps. So you take an automated demo and send it to the prospect before, say before their sales appointment. Well, if they engage with that before the sales appointment, are they going to be asking the sales engineer for a demo? Well, if they do, you send them a qualifying demo or the standard demo. And if they engage with that, then you get the pre-sales team involved. So hopefully that helps illustrate kind of how that can work. Now, the third principle is to delegate. And the question is, can we delegate any of these demos to AEs or BDRs? Well, in the study that the research that we did, about 30% of the industry already is. So if you aren't trying it, maybe worth something to consider. And what they mean by this is we're delegating to AEs or BDRs to do demos on their own without pre-sales. And I know that sounds a bit scary. Like, what are they going to say? How are they going to do it? They don't even know the platform. So there are different ways that we could try to do that, but the first question is, which types of demos should they be doing? And our argument is just the top two types, vision demos and micro demos. The others really should be left to sales engineering, whether they're automated or in person. So how do we delegate demos to sales? Just a few ideas: slide decks that focus on the problem, solution, and benefit for vision and micro demos with screenshots. Maybe record even simple screen recordings that they can play back. They could even read a script along with it, or maybe they're just playing them live in a live. There's a sales engineer, and the AEs are playing them live right there during the live call. So again, demo automation, as we mentioned, is a reusable library of interactive video demos. Okay, so let's jump into another area, which is multilingual market coverage. And this is a challenge, of course. As an example, some of our customers in Europe service 9 different language markets. So it's very difficult unless you have translators or you've got sales engineers in all those different markets, which can be a challenge. So the idea here is to use a screen recorder and record them in the primary language, then get them translated and use some captions and so on. And I'm just going to kind of post these up here just in the interest of time. I'm just looking at the time. We're running a little short. But the idea is just use screen recordings to help service the multilingual markets, and then use them in conjunction with demo automation platform like Consensus. Lastly, webinars, live mass demos, having a schedule where once a month, maybe twice a month, you do a vision demo and a micro demo. So again, which ones are suitable for webinars? Vision, micro, and the standard demo really are the best ones for this. The technical and closing demos and FAQ demos probably are not. So a few tips on webinars. Typically you want to combine the vision and micro demo together because the webinar is a little bit longer. So you just start out with the vision, problem, solution, benefit, then move into the specifics of the platform. But again, you're just going really light on this. They're not ready to dive deep at this point. and maybe offer 2 webinars a month, a vision and micro demo, which is sort of the introduction, and then a standard demo later in the month, a couple weeks later, deeper dive. And some people want to have a live interaction, but they don't want to engage with a specific salesperson or specific pre-sales person. So this can help expand your coverage even just from a personal preference standpoint. And using demo automation before or after can really help. Before they enter the webinar or after the webinar can help move them along quickly through the education process. So you can ask them poll questions to further qualify them during the webinar, and maybe ask them to complete a post-webinar survey that helps further qualify. So last topic is, what kind of KPIs are we looking at to scale if we want to track how we're scaling? So just a few thoughts here. The average demo requests per sales rep, and are we tracking what types of demo requests they're sending over the wall to the pre-sales team? The percentage of time solution consultants spend on key activities. Again, that's important just as a baseline, and also as we try to increase that amount. The AE to SE ratio, interestingly, should be increasing, right? Normally we think, well, we don't want to increase that. But the reality is, if we can get better and better at automating, delegating, eliminating those unqualified demos, then each pre-sales rep should be able to service more and more account executives. The number of video demo views is just a basic one to see how much time is being spent watching the demo, and the number of stakeholders discovered as the demo gets shared around. This can really shorten the sales cycle as you discover and engage them rapidly early in the process. The number of video demos sent by AEs and BDRs, for example. And then the number of live demos, if you're delegating them, how many are being conducted. And the number of participants attending webinar demos, for example. So that is a quick blitz through these 8 different micro strategies. And again, maybe not all of these apply, but hopefully some of them do. And you can think about how could you apply some of these. Just to remind you that with just an emphasis on demo automation and automating, eliminating those unqualified demos, you can increase your productivity by as much as 30%. So if I were in your shoes, that'd be one of the places I would start. But the very first place to start is defining the gap. So these are the main principles. And again, just want to emphasize, what are you going to say no to? We're going to say no to doing all demos with live SEs. That has to happen. We have to say no to something. And again, finding another way to do it. What are we saying yes to? Better customer experience. Sales team gets what they need more quickly. Better use of resources, and which ends up being better margins, and better alignment of resources with demand. And lastly, more strategic and less robotic repetition. So I'm going into a deeper dive on demo automation strategies tomorrow, just as a reminder there. And I think we might have just a minute or two for a question or two. And we can always continue Q&A kind of on the scaling pre-sales LinkedIn group if we don't have time for all the questions today.
That's a great place to post any questions that we don't get to. I'm going to try and surface a couple of these questions, especially the ones that are getting asked over and over again. One of the ones that is coming from Danny and Doug. Doug's actually a customer, and Mike and some others is how do we get a hold of that spreadsheet? Oh, and tied to that, how do we get a hold of the deck?
Yes, so we're going to be posting the recording of the webinar, as well as any related resources like the spreadsheet and the deck materials that'll be part of the recording, meaning they'll be associated in the document library. And we'll post those out to the Scaling Presales LinkedIn group. So I think John already put that LinkedIn group link in the chat. So just, you want to go sign up there.
Yeah, and if anybody's familiar, if you've ever watched a consensus automated demo before, there's a document library down at the bottom in the player, so that you're watching through your chapters, but you have associated documents down there. So we publish all of our stuff in our own player, obviously, and so you'll be able to get it there when we post the link to the recordings in the LinkedIn group, as Garen said. So here's an interesting one. So any tools or tips for gamifying the qualification and discovery process, i.e. upgrading MQL to an SQL, et cetera, or tips for gamification for your team for adoption?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love the question of gamification. I spent a lot of years in the instructional technology world, and gamification is so key to learning and getting people to do things. I mean, there was one time I was trying to teach, for example, I was a training department of one early in my career at a software company, and we were trying to get customer support teams to learn the new release notes, and there was nobody to train them effectively. And so what we did is we set up a game between the different support teams, and they were endlessly studying the release notes. So I was impressed by how much behavioral change happened just when we added this gamification. So I think I'm a big fan of that. I would say I don't know of any specific tools for gamifying this, but I would just say that it's hard to gamify if you aren't measuring, right? So I know in Consensus, for example, we have a leaderboard that will show who has the highest share rate or the highest view rate or who sent the most demos out and things like that. So it doesn't incorporate all of the KPIs that I shared here, but it incorporates those that have to do with demo automation. And so that may be something to look into if you have your own, if you're already a customer or you're looking into Consensus. But I'd say the main principle is you've got to measure first before you can have gamification, because without the measurement, you don't know what the progress is like.
So that actually dovetails into Vikas's question, which is, do you use any tool for KPI measurement?
So KPIs are often pulled together in the CRM, and just because that's where a lot of the activity happens. So that's where I would see these KPIs coming. So for example, Vivint, the sales engineering company that's focusing on tracking sales engineering activities, is building their platform inside Salesforce, or at least somehow connects with Salesforce. So I'm no expert there on their technology, but the point is, if you can pull their data in there on activities, you can pull Consensus data into Salesforce, for example, through demo automation. Then you've got live demo information, your automated demo information all in one place, and you can build some dashboards there. That's what I would recommend is doing it in your CRM.
Very cool. So one of these questions here, now this one I should be able to answer, but I don't. The question is, can you share a link to Garen's book pre-sale on Amazon? I don't know that we have that yet, do we?
No, I wish we did, but what we've opted to do is a certain type of publishing where we have no inventory. So it's just print on demand, and with those print on demands, Amazon does not let you pre-order. So we may allow you to at least sign up someplace. Because of DEMOFEST, we've sort of put marketing and promoting the book on a bit of a back burner, because this has been taking up all of our time. But yeah, I would just say keep an eye out for it. And we'll obviously be sending out an email or two to announce it once it's published too.
Yeah, and I can't say enough about that. We focus on scaling pre-sales as one of our major initiatives. But if you dive more deeply into buyer enablement, you find that really kind of sits at the core of a lot of these strategies that we're talking about. And it can really kind of change the way that you think about buying and selling.
It's so true, and just to mention, it's really about focusing on what do the buyers need at every stage of that buying process, right? What do they need, and how can we effectively get that to them, and how can we anticipate their needs before they even know? Because we're experts at the buying process as sellers, because we've been through it a lot. So just a little thought there.
And there's actually a webinar that you can go you can watch if you want on buyer enablement out on the Consensus site, along with all of the other scaling pre-sales webinar series and a bunch of other great content. So we're running up against our hard stop. I guess we don't have a super hard stop because this is the last session of DEMOFEST, but Garen, do you have any other thoughts? I'm looking we've got some other questions here that I would encourage everybody to reach out to Garen on LinkedIn and Garen can answer questions there, and a best place to put them is probably in our LinkedIn group. So I'm going to put the link back there again, and
yeah, I think that'd be a great place to have
chat.
the conversation. That way, other people get involved, share their perspectives and experiences as well. So. Yeah, it's been wonderful to spend the time with everybody today. I hope some of this was useful. I know some of you are already trying many of these, so hopefully if you are, I'd love to hear more about how they're working or things you're struggling with. So it'd be great to have some of those conversations in the LinkedIn group.
Fantastic. All right, so I'm just as a reminder to everybody, we have tomorrow, not to be missed, is our keynote with Adam Freeman tomorrow on non-financial pre-sales KPIs. So as we talk about scaling pre-sales, and Garen talked a little bit about how if we're doing it right, we should actually not be afraid of increasing AE to SE ratios, right? Well, Adam Freeman, I happen to know because I've spoken with him pretty extensively. Adam heads up a really high performance pre-sales team. Like they're one of those teams up there in like the 15:1 kind of ratio, and they're comfy.
Wow.
And so, yeah, they're doing some really crazy stuff there. So if you want to know about, if you want to talk to somebody who's doing a great job in there, and demo automation is a part of what they're doing, but it's they have a high performance team across the board. So highly recommend that keynote. And remember, that's Mountain Daylight Time, so that's UTC -6. So we're an hour ahead of Pacific and 2 hours behind Eastern. So we're just kind of like right in the middle. And we look forward to seeing everybody there.
Great. Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.
All right. See everybody tomorrow.
Bye now.